Hey guys, so even professional artists or people that have been doing it for a long time make mistakes. There's many artists out there with lots of drawers or shelves full of half-done drawings, but I just thought I'd leave this in this time just to show you what can happen and things that can go wrong sometimes, and how you can fix them and how you can actually end up with something that you're happy with at the end of it. Okay, so in this tutorial I'll be using some graphite powder and some cheap makeup brushes. This is a nice short stubby brush, and I'm going to be basically drawing the underpainting with graphite powder first. You can see I've already done the line drawing. You can get the full real-time tutorial over on my Patreon, where you will also be able to download the line drawing guide. So I'm going to start just filling in the eye. It helps give me a reference and somewhere to go when I'm doing the underdrawing. So I'm just using, this is a slightly rounder brush, and I'm just going to be brushing in this graphite powder. It can be a little bit messy, so just be aware of that. I'm just brushing in the graphite. I'm trying to do the direction of the fur, but it's not too much of a problem at this stage. This helps give you a guide and gives you something to work from. Okay, so I'm using my stick here because I don't want to press my hand onto the paper. And I'm using my 2B mechanical pencil just to start bringing in some details. And this is actually a 4B pencil just to bring in the darker area of this horn. And I'll correct my mistake at the very end of the video. At this stage I'm not doing too much in the way of detail. I'm just shading in the areas that I want to be shaded. There'll be a lot more work to do to this afterwards. Now, when you're drawing something with a lot of fur especially, you want to be mindful of where the fur layers. So, for example, this cow has a layer of fur. It's got this hide at the back in this picture. So I want to draw that first. So anything that's underneath needs to be drawn first. So there's fur and hair that goes over the top of this, and this is sort of in the background, so you want to draw this first. And I'm using a mixture here of my 2B mechanical pencil, my 4B pencil, and this Mono Zero eraser. And what I'm doing is I'm leaving in the marks, so I'm basically drawing in the fur by erasing the graphite, and I'm putting some darker areas in with my 4B pencil. So I will put the fur in. You're trying to create something that looks like fur. You don't need to draw every single strand of fur. Now this drawing, as you'll see later on, is actually more challenging than even I first thought. So this doesn't quite go to plan, and I thought I'd leave it in just to show you that every artist out there has got a drawer full of drawings that they started and didn't finish. But this one I'm actually going to finish, and I can show you how I correct things when I'm not happy with them or when they go wrong. So drawing a cow like this is basically a challenge because you're drawing fur, and fur, messy fur, long, fine, messy fur is actually one of the hardest furs to draw, I find, especially in graphite pencil. The idea is not to put too much graphite down that you can't erase it to give you the definition of the fur, but put enough down to be able to give you some sort of texture. So this is why doing it in layers is much more helpful. Should you go wrong, you can change it and fix it a little bit more easily. So I'm trying to match the reference picture here as best I can. And I'm using my graphite powder. This eraser is actually a flat eraser. Mostly the reason I'm doing this is because I find it's easier to keep clean. It's a larger area, but also you can drag it along to make the fur and press a little bit harder than a mono zero. Excuse my face in the camera, I need to change the angle of my camera. And I'm using here a very dark Mars Lumograph pencil just to bring in this darkness around the ear and around the eye, just to give some sort of depth to the picture. Although I do regret going in with this pencil slightly too early, so again, we all get things a little bit wrong, and I thought I'd show you what to do if you do that. So what I did here is I started using this Mars Lumograph black pencil far too soon. It's something that I should have used towards the end. I got a little bit carried away with myself, forgetting that I can't put all the details into this because it's a very furry or hairy animal. However, it worked out okay in the end because it did define this ear to stop it getting lost in all the fur. So every time I put pencil down, I'm going back over it with a blending stump just to smooth that in. And again, I'm using my Mars Lumograph black pencil here, trying to get some definition of the fur. So this is a speeded up version of my real-time tutorial that will be over on Patreon, and the real-time version has a lot more information in it. I appreciate everybody who supports me on Patreon, and it's a real-time version where you can draw along with me and I will guide you all along the way so you can produce this yourself or something better, as I will be able to tell you what not to do before I do it, which should give you a better picture. Okay, so I'm working on this ear now, and I'm using my mechanical pencil. The reason I'm using my mechanical pencil is it keeps a fine point. You don't have to do that, just keep a sharp point on your pencils and you'll be fine. I'm mixing up, going between my mechanical 2B pencil here and a 4B and a 6B pencil, and then I'm going over each time with my eraser just to put in that fur. And then if you can see, I'm using the darker pencils just to sort of go over the fur or go next to the white lines that I've created, which gives you a little bit more depth to the fur. And this is a stage I'm starting to think, this is harder than I thought. There's a lot of fur. But obviously we can keep persevering and get there. There's a lot of fur, but it's not just the fact that it's a lot of fur, it's also fine fur and long fur and messy fur. So you need to do this if you want to get it. You can probably do a smaller version, but it obviously won't have the detail. Perhaps I'll do that in the future. But if you want to get a little bit more detail, you really need to make sure that it's a big enough canvas to make sure that when you put your mono zero, your thin erasers down, it does create the look of a thin hair. If you make say this was an A4 piece, the hairs that I would be able to put down would look too thick for the proportions of the picture. You can download these tutorials in real time as a one-off, so you just pay a one-off amount and just download the tutorial. You don't have to sign up monthly. So if you go over to my Patreon and you see a tutorial that you want to draw, want to give a try to, you can download it just as a one-off. So towards the end of this video I'll show you what I'm not happy with and how I correct it, just to show you how things can be corrected to make things actually work how you want them. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm going over the face now of the cow, and I'm putting in all the dark areas with a 4B pencil. So I'm just adding all the dark areas and going in the direction of the fur as always. Depending on when you watch this video, this full-time version is up on my Patreon. If you're watching this video brand new, as it close to the time I've just put it on, it won't quite be ready yet. So keep checking back. Okay, so now I'm going in the direction of the fur with my eraser, and I'm just trying to build up the layers. And this is all you're doing really with this. However, there are a few different techniques and issues that I come up with along the way, which I can explain in more detail. So there's longer hair up at the top here, so I'm making longer strokes with this pencil, and then using my blending stump to blend it in. Now this fur at the back of the cow does tend to make the cow look a little bit strange when the picture is finished, because obviously it's not a photograph. I end up not being very happy with the fact that the whole back end of the cow is in the picture, and I feel that the picture would have looked better without it. So I will at the end show you what I can do when things go a little bit wrong and I'm not happy with the picture. So at the moment I'm doing a lot of white highlights, but I'm just trying to go over it all with the white highlights with my eraser, and now I'm going in and I'm being a little bit more careful to just sort of border those lines and fill in some darker areas with my darker pencils. And it's really all about working the picture over and over, doing the different layers until you're happy with it. So as I said, we've got hair and fur that's going all over the place, but if you can just try and focus and stick with it, trust in the process, and you'll get there. Okay, so now we're starting to sort of bring in the face of this cow. So that's the bit that's the most forward of the picture. That's the bit that people are going to notice the most. So this is where I'm going to start spending a little bit more time adding in the details. Now obviously I'm not trying to draw every strand of hair, so I'm just trying to make it look like the impression of hair. Your eyes will fill in the rest. So if you just do as many wisps of hair in the right direction as you can, then that's all you need to do, and you can overwork pictures sometimes. And I'm using the blending stump each time. And like I said, I do have a full real-time tutorial over my Patreon. If you want to subscribe to my channel, you'll see a lot more tutorials, and there are different techniques for different pictures. So I do graphite pencils here, but I also do pastel pencils. I do animals and I do people. I've got some exciting things coming up. If you're interested in art, it might be worth subscribing so that you don't miss them, and it really helps me out and helps me to do more of these free videos. But if you really want to start drawing, it's all about getting some pencils, getting some paper and just starting. Once you've started, that's the biggest hurdle you'll find, and then just practice, and if you enjoy it, that's the main thing. Okay, so I'm just going around here trying to get the direction of fur, as this cow is one big ball of fur with a horn, an eye and a nose. So where the fur goes up underneath here, it's darker, so I'm just trying to use my pencil to darken these areas and just bring some depth. And this is why I always talk about using dark pencils to bring depth to your picture. If I just used a light or even a dark 6B graphite pencil here, it wouldn't have been quite dark enough, and it wouldn't have brought so much depth to the picture. And I'm using my mechanical pencil just to start drawing in some of the details of the cow's nose. Now, when you're doing the cow's nose, or an animal's nose and eyes, they are the bits that make the picture look more real. So they're the bits that bring the picture to life. All the rest of it is sort of background. If you can get the noses and the eyes right, then you can really sort of bring a picture to life. So I'm using my blending stump here to sort of draw with, because the skin of the cow's nose is smooth. And obviously using the dark black pencils as well around the nostrils makes them go in and they're deeper. And I'm using a kneaded eraser also, just to lift some of that charcoal around the nose, so it's more of a smooth appearance. And I'm working on the nose, trying to spend a bit more time adding the details in, as this is one of the things that will bring the picture to life. Just trying to add all the little dark patches before we do the fur around the nose. And I'm just feathering this fur inwards towards the nose, stopping obviously well short of the nose where it needs to. And it's quite dark fur around here, as it's shadowed by the rest of the fur. And just doing a mixture of soft and light pressures on the pencils, just trying to get this to look as real as I can. The paper I'm using is not a Bristol Smooth. This is a Hannah Mule hot pressed paper. It's more like a watercolour, between a watercolour and a smooth paper. So it does have a little bit more grain. So there's good things and bad things about that. Obviously with more grain you can add more layers of whatever medium you're using, like graphite. But also it's harder to sort of get that smooth look, so it will always appear a little bit more grainy. But that can add to the picture. Depends what type of art you're trying to produce. If it's a photorealistic or hyper-realistic drawing, then you would probably look to use different paper. But this drawing is a representation of a highland cow, so I'm quite happy using this paper. So now we can see we're getting into adding the finer details around the nose. And as I do that, I'm going up, adding darker areas, trying to get this face and this sort of nostril area right. And then drawing down the charcoal and almost drawing with the blending stumps as well. Going back over with a kneaded eraser and just trying to get that to look as it should. Now the end of the cow's nose is a little bit, got a few lumps and bumps there, so that's what I'm doing here. And again, bringing my eraser in to bring the highlights of the fur. And it's really all about going over and over until you're happy with what you have. You don't need to add any of the finer hairs and finer details until the very last bit. That's what I'm starting to do now, pressing quite hard with the eraser just to bring those thicker pieces of fur in. Like I said, I do have a full tutorial. I will have a full tutorial of this real time, along with many others, over on my Patreon. And now I'm bringing in a little bit of darker areas as we come towards the end of this picture. And it was quite a difficult picture to draw. I wasn't quite ready for the fact that I hadn't drawn this much fur on an animal in some time using graphite pencils. Okay, so I'm trying to add some definition to this horn now, following some of the details, darkening underneath where the light is, where it's in the shadow. I'm using a drawing stick. This is just so that I can rest my hand away from the picture. So obviously you're using a lot of graphite here and it can get quite messy. And there's something about this picture that's not quite right. It's been bugging me all along. Although it's like in the reference picture, I don't like the fact that you can see the back end of the cow. So because I haven't pressed hard or used a lot of dark on that, I can correct it by erasing the back end of the cow. And that's the thing about being an artist. It's your artwork and you can draw it as you want. So I'm using my larger eraser here just to erase the back end of the cow, and I just think that that will give a better portrait picture of this cow. I'm just going to add in a few bits of fur here just to make it look and sit right. Just add in a bit more detail to the horn. So I'm a lot happier with that. Although the drawing was challenging, I'm a lot happier with it, and once mounted I think it'll look okay. So thanks for watching, give it a go, and don't forget to check out my Patreon and also subscribe to see more.